Hello and greetings. I'm Casey Clayton, the Cloud Real-Time Solution Specialist with Informatica Cloud, and I'd like to welcome you to Keeping It Real Time, your guide to the DIY API Cloud. On this edition of Keeping It Real Time, it's DIY API, Salesforce Real Time Orchestration. This has actually been broken up into 4 different chapters, each one building on some of the knowledge gained and components built in the previous chapter. Each video will include a link to download the process designer artifacts that you can load into your own Informatica Cloud Real-Time org to learn from as you try to apply some of these techniques to your own systems. DIY API Salesforce Real-Time Orchestration, Part 1. Building your first real-time API interaction with Salesforce. Let me start by saying one thing that you rarely see today in a business-driven IT environment is a solo act. It's a single system that has all the information a user needs in order to perform their job fully. Often there are several sources of truth that are designed and deployed at different times to meet specific needs. We're finding when it comes to the customers of Salesforce we've been talking to, there are challenges in meeting business requirements for a single source of truth. Because of the time and resource commitment by a traditional hand coding approach to integration, businesses often had to make severe trade-offs that can be measured in increased training overhead and productivity loss to swivel chair integrations. These not only lead to adoption issues, but have clear impacts to the top line ROI. So the goal of Volume 1 is to show you how Informatica Cloud provides an easy way for a business user to integrate your Salesforce org or orgs with any number of web services and external data sources and provide real-time feedback to end users. We're going to show how this is done from scratch, and by the end of this demo, we'll have fully implemented and deployed a working real-time integration. So our scenario for part 1 is going to be simple and out of the box. The business event is going to be a user creating a contact record within Salesforce. Now, our business process for new Salesforce contacts is going to start with validating this email address, in this case with the web service that we have. And then from there, we're actually going to, if the email is invalid, we're going to change a validation status, which is a custom field on our contact, to invalid. We're going to create a task for the contact owner, so letting them know that the email is invalid on the contact that they own and they should correct it. And to make sure that they do it, we're going to follow a process that includes sending an email to a contact owner's manager. And all this is going to be automated behind the scenes based on this web service call result. So if the email is valid, we're going to go ahead and set the validation status on the contact to valid, and then we're just going to make a little chatter post on the contact saying that it's been validated. So these are going to be the business processes. All the users are going to have to do is create the record within Salesforce, and this process will not only integrate but then notify the end user. So how are we going to do this? We're going to use an event-driven integration pattern where records updated in Salesforce, and if it meets a certain criteria, it's going to have some process be executed behind the scenes. Now, in this case, we're going to use a Salesforce Outbound Message, which is a code-free way to actually make a web service call from within Salesforce to perform different kinds of process actions. You can use outbound messages and processes to synchronize data in real time with databases or other applications. You can execute complicated business rule checks. You can call internal, or as we're going to do in this demo, call an external API for some data validation. Now, outbound messages allow for code-free interactions. This is a great way to use Salesforce and Informatica Cloud to create a complete process that could involve, in this case, just a single API, but as we'll build out in the future chapters, more integrations and interactions. We have a dedicated handling for outbound messages in Informatica Cloud, so it uses the session ID of the user, and we'll show you as part of this demo how we'll actually set that up. So the sample web service we're going to use for this is a validate email web service. I found it online at mashape.com. It checks the domain name of the email and then validates the email for all the accepted characters. So it goes above and beyond just a simple @ and a dot, and it actually checks to make sure that the email address is valid in a way that Salesforce is not able to do out of the box. So here's going to be our high-level process steps for this. We're going to configure a service connector for the REST-based API, and we're going to publish a connection for this service with our authentication key that we got from Mashape. We're going to design a process in the Informatica Cloud Process Designer for Salesforce contacts that's going to handle the validation and contain the business logic that's going to create the tasks and such for our users. We're going to publish that process and get a URL, and we're going to use that URL inside of an outbound message, which will be called from a workflow rule that we'll first configure in Salesforce, with some criteria about when we should be calling this service. So let's go ahead and get started with this demo. Thank you very much.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and start off on the landing page of Informatica Cloud. This is the starting point for everything that you do with the Informatica Cloud iPaaS. In this case, to work with our real-time service and process designer, you would go under the design menu and select the services and processes option. That will take you to the services and process design template, where you have all the artifacts and guides and connections and processes that you've created over time. We're going to go ahead and start off in this section. When I said we were going to start from scratch, it wasn't completely from scratch. We do have the Informatica Cloud real-time Salesforce connection published here. It's part of the managed package that comes with Informatica Cloud Real-Time that enables metadata discovery about all your Salesforce objects and fields and pick list values and record types and relationships, as well as the ability to publish guides and generate these special outbound message URLs that we have handling the authentication. So we have the Salesforce connection in place. And what we needed to do, as we said in the first step, is actually set up our connection to that web service, that RESTful web service that we're going to give us access to the email validation. So I've got it set up over here. This is where I found it online. Within our tool, in order to consume any REST or SOAP-based API out there, whether or not it's something you've created yourself or you've found online or as part of a major application like NetSuite or others, you would use a service connector within Informatica Cloud Real-Time to make that happen. So we're going to select a service connector. And within here, we're going to give it a name. We're just going to call this thing free services, because that's what they are. We're just taking these off the internet from Mashape. You can sign up there and get your own API key for developing, playing with these things. Now, the description for this is just going to be our service connector. It's going to be providing action for email validation and perhaps others in the future. And now we are going to give this a connection property. As you can see within Mashape, they require this key that they provide to us. So, here's the one that they've provided. You can sign up and get one of your own for free. And we would actually go ahead and put this into our connection property. Just call it my API key. Drop this value in here. There we go. We'll say that it's going to be required because we'll need it for when we publish the connection. And then we'll go ahead and give it a tag here on this so we can keep track of our work as we go. This is going to be the DIY API Volume 1 tag. You saw the only other thing that had that was the Salesforce connection, so now this will appear in that same space. So when defining our service, it's really all about the actions. The actions are things like get customer data or validate email or create sales order, do fulfillment. These are things that you would kind of actions around web services that are available on the net. And so what we're going to do here, we're just going to create an action called validate email. And the description will be web service action to validate email addresses. Now the input that we're going to have into this service action is just going to be, we're going to call it email to verify. So there's the underlying name, and you can use that by default, or you can go ahead and give it a friendlier name to end users. Fill it out here with the spaces in there. This is going to be required, and so by setting it as required, anytime we use it in a process, it'll automatically pop up for us. And then we're going to uncheck this because it's not going to go as a query string parameter. By looking at this particular API, you can see all it's asking us to do is put the email address here at the end of the URL that they provide. So I'm going to copy this URL. And once again, we're building this kind of API interaction from scratch here. I'm going to take the URL, and in our binding tab, I'm going to go ahead and drop it into the URL section. So there's the email address that they're provided. Now I'm going to go in. Now we want to insert the name of our input variable here, so you can see between the little curly brackets. Actually, what I can do is I can open up our formula editor, and that will give us the ability to select within the variables that are known here. So I'll just get rid of this and say, hey, I want to insert a field. All right, email to verify, that's the field that I wanted to put in there. So I'll hit OK. And you can see anything within these curly brackets is a variable that will get filled into there. So the other parameters that we want to go ahead and pass are actually going to be in the header. As you saw in our description here, they've got this mass shape key, that's an API key, so it's easy to set up the header that this thing needs. We can just go ahead and say X mass shape key, and then what we'll do is we'll insert the field my API key, and it's from those properties. We'll give it the little curly brackets for the variable, and then it also asked for an accept parameter, not always required, but you can see here we'll say accept and then application JSON. So we're doing real web services programming here, working with going to get a JSON payload. Let's go ahead and test this out. I'm going to go ahead and put my email address in here. Feel free to use it to reach out to me with questions. So there's the email address in there. Looks good to me. Here's my binding. And now the output tab we're going to get to in a moment, because we want to actually see what the results of this web service call look like. So I'm going to go ahead and test it here. And you can see we made this request out. There's the URL that we sent out. It just, made it easy to put that variable in there. And then you can see the response payload that actually came back from them. Is valid. So it's a very simple response that we got back. And now we can actually use this and say, okay, anybody calling the validate email service, we're going to return the true or false, so they can use this in a business process or as part of a composite action. So I'm going to come in here to my output tab, and using these output fields is as simple as actually you could just put in the name of the property there is valid. And so you could see using this property, it actually just is the name of the tag and the response. If it's unique, it's easy to grab. There's a number of different ways that you can get information that is returned to you. And we can get into some of those in future chapters. But let's go ahead and test this now. You can see we've got this is valid, is true. Let's go ahead and make this name a little bit more friendly. We'll just say, we'll call it, say, email validated. And it's going to get this, output from the is valid property on the service. So we're going to save this. We're going to publish it. So we've actually created this web service connection from scratch. Just to verify that it's working, I'm going to go ahead and change the email address here in this test with, change it to a domain that I know that doesn't exist, Informatica with 3 A's. I can go ahead and test it. You can see it comes back false. So our web service is working and we're ready to work with it. So there's our free service. And we're going to go ahead. From here, we create a connection within Informatica Cloud Real-Time. This is how you manage the credentials from various environments, from dev to test to stage. The connection is actually the credentials that you're going to use in production. Those values that we saw back on the service connector are actually the test with values to help you validate things, but it's really the connection that contains the credentials that are going to be used for real, allowing for a little level of additional security. So in connection here, you'll select your types, and if we've published this thing, we'll be able to see it in the drop down. There it is, free service. So I'm going to go in and we're going to give this connection a name, something like free service actions. Here, we can't gotta leave out the spaces, so we'll just call it free service actions. Or actually, we'll just give it a better name, validation services. And then, so from validation services, we'll be able to, say this will be the connection for our for services defined in a free service connector. Give this the tag so we can keep track of everything. So we're going to grab the API key, drop it here, we'll save and publish. Okay, so that's the pre-work. We've done everything that we needed to do from scratch to be able to consume this web service. But now, so how does Salesforce going to come into play? Remember that the purpose of this was all about creating a contact record within Salesforce and then doing something with that. So with these elements in place, the next piece of the puzzle is to actually create a process. Now, processes in Informatica Cloud Real-Time are what give you the ability to listen to business events that come from various applications and then to orchestrate a response to those events, whether they be to
create new records, or as in this case we're going to do here, reach out to an external web service to validate some information before updating the contact record. So we create a new process just like we did for those other elements. We're going to give this process a name. We're going to call it the cloud contact process. Seems pretty straightforward. We're going to use it for cloud-based validation of contact events out of Salesforce. So it's going to be the cloud contact process. Now the applies to here is the key element. By telling Informatica Cloud Real-Time that this process applies to a Salesforce contact, we're actually going to generate a special outbound message URL specific to the contact object that you'll be able to use, just drop right into the Salesforce configuration. So now we want to just make sure this is going to be for validating Salesforce contact data in real time. We'll just give that description, and we'll put our tag in here. So you just start typing the tags, and it suggests everything that's related, makes it nice and easy. Now it's a best practice when you're just getting started to actually go here to the Advanced tab and turn on tracing. This is what's going to allow you to actually see the data at the various steps of the process in our process monitor. Informatica Cloud has the ability to go see the processes after they've executed, what path they went down and potentially why. So we're going to turn on verbose tracing to check things out in the process monitor later. You turn it back down to none for security purposes once you go out into production to make sure that no sensitive data gets persisted. So here we are, and here's our cloud contact process. I'm going to hit OK. Brings us fully into the designer here. Now, clicking out a step is what brings you to the property sheet. The key element is going to be the step type. Now, we have a number of different step types. We're going to see a few of them over the course of this particular process design. But where we wanted to start here was actually a service call. This gives us the ability to use the actions that came from the connections and the service connectors that we've defined. So I'm going to come in here under Action, and I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to look for my validation services. There they are. And so I've just got one action there in validation services called Validate Email. I'm going to select that, and then it's going to tell me in the Information tab what input fields it's going to expect, and then also what output fields it's going to inject into the process. And so the way our processes work is we actually have a persistence layer, and it allows things to be stateful, which means it's aware of where it is in the process, and it's also aware of the values of the records of things that's done previously in the process. So you don't need to tell a bunch of systems along the way what the values are. This process will persist it, and if you need to reuse something, you're able to just use it as one of these output fields, in this case email validated. So with this service call and this input here, remember the input we defined on the action was email to verify. We could hard code something here, but of course what we want to do is actually take it from the contact. So if we select the source to be field, it gives us here by clicking click to select field. These are going to be all the fields that are available in our contact object, whether they're custom fields or out of the box. The ability to get the metadata out of Salesforce allows us to see all these things here. And so we can see every field on the contact, not just the contact, but we can actually go up to the account or the owner or other related objects and get any of those fields. So what I want to get here is just the contact email, and we're going to use that to make this web service call. So the service call is going to be made, and then what are we going to do with that information? We need to make a decision. The decision is if that email is valid, we want to go down one road where we let them know the chatter post, and if it's invalid, we want to create a task, get the user involved in this integration piece, make sure that they know they need to correct information. And this works even if it's been bulk uploaded. It's just going to go to the owner of the record. So we're going to put a data decision on this email validated. You'll see below all the contact fields, all the new fields that get created over the course of the process execution begin to appear here. So here's email validated. We want to say if email validated equals true, then we're going to go ahead and go the one path. Otherwise, we'll go down this path. So, the unhappy path where the validation failed is actually, where a lot of the work needs to be done. We need to make sure the end user, in this case, knows something has to be done. So what the business process was they asked us to create a task. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to select a create step, and we're going to go in here and set the object type to a Salesforce and task. And so it's going to bring in all the information by default. It knows about all the fields. These are the ones that are required in your field level security configuration. So, it's going to be associated with that contact ID We want to go ahead and set the status to not started, the priority to high. We could go ahead and include a subject field, to make it helpful here. It would be something along the lines of correct data issue on contact, and we can include the contact name in here. Just by clicking on this gives you access to all the fields. So full name. We'll put in a description. Now, have a little bit more information in here. We'll include all of this info here into the description, and then we could also include email address invalid. Know what the email is there. All right, the other thing that we wanted to do if the email was invalid was we wanted to update a couple values on the Salesforce record. So we'll do that with an assignment. We're going to say update validation status to invalid. So we'll go in here. Now here's all of our contact fields that we have available. We're going to go ahead and select validation status. And you can see here, it knows the drop-down values that I've configured for this in Salesforce, so I'm going to select invalid. And then I'm also going to include in the validation messages something along the lines of email validation failed. And actually, if we want to include any other validation messages that might have been there before, you can always just say, hey, I want to grab the validation messages that were there before, and then include this line here below it. So email validation failed, and they'll also include email address. All right, so that's the end of that particular path. We'll leave out the email step for now. We can actually come back and refine this process at a later step. I'm going to get rid of that extra untitled step, and now we're going to do the happy path. Now, as we recall, the happy path had a couple of steps. The first thing that we were actually going to do is create a chatter post. So we'll go ahead and once again do another create step. In this case, we're going to go Salesforce, and instead of task, it's just going to be a simple feed item. It's going to be associated here to this contact. Actually, we can say, let's make it associated to the account, right? And then we just want to set the body. And so the body for the feed item could be something along the lines of contact updated and validated by, and we could include the current user, full name. Here, we can make this bigger just by dragging this out, opening this up a little bit. Then we can also include the contact name, full name. So you can actually, build up, a very nice and informative chatter post message with variables and words, to meet this custom process situation. And then we'll just say contact email here. So useful information, always helpful. Email, and then buy. And then, of course, we want to make sure in this case we're going to also update the Salesforce record, the validation status. Go here, the validation status is going to become valid, and then we're going to just clear out the validation messages. This is blank. Let's update validation status to valid. Apply. And then it's automatically going to try to insert another step just in case you wanted to do something else. We're going to go ahead and delete that. And then I'm going to close this pin, and we can just take a look at our process at an overall level. So it comes in the front door. We know that we're working on a contact record. We have the ID. And so in this step, we're going to call the web service, pulling the contact email directly off the contact record in Salesforce. We're going to check the results to see if it was validated. If it was not validated, we're going to create a task for the actually, we need to make sure that we decide who it's assigned to. So I'm going to go in here and say the assigned to ID. In this case, we could say it's a specific person. It gives you the ability to look that up. but we actually want to assign it, in this case, to, say, the contact owner ID. There we go. So now it'll make sure it goes to the place. We'll give it a helpful name for somebody who needs to look at this later. Create data validation task for user. And actually, we have a record type that we want to use directly for this. So if I just go in here, record type ID, test record type ID, it's going to go in and pull those. And you don't need to remember what the string is of the record type like you do sometimes when you're doing Salesforce queries. It gives you the names here. This is a data follow-up. So everything that about the task can be defined here, according to your business process. We're going to apply that, and we're going to save it, and then we're going to go ahead and publish this. Now we're going to come back for the URL in a second. The first thing that we're going to do is get into Salesforce and do a little bit of configuration over here. Because remember, this is about an event in Salesforce, and so we use workflow rules. You just come into the setup and go workflow rules. And you can see I don't have any currently on the contact object, so I'm going to create a new rule. And we'll call this contact on the object. And we'll give it a name like let's see, contact. We'll call it validate contact or something simple. There we go. This is going to be workflow rule to call outbound message that validates and synchronizes contact info. We're going to want to run this thing created, and every time that it's edited, just in case we need to revalidate it sometime down the road. And then we're going to give it a couple criteria. Now, one simple criteria we have, we can assume that the maybe they don't have access to those validation status fields. So we don't want to have to send it every time. So if we've already validated it, we can say if the contact validation status is, say, not equal to, valid, then we'll want to check this. And then also it's a best practice that I want to call out here in terms of having an API user account set up in Salesforce so that you can have a dedicated user account with the proper permissions to do the updates. And also it allows you to identify when changes are made by external systems so you don't run your workflow rules on those and call the other system back even though it already knows what it just told you. So we can go in here and we can say last modified by. I've got a user. So we want to make sure that it's not equal to, in this case, my API user. And this is actually a user's name that we have in the system. I'm going to save the workflow rule. And now in the next step, it's going to ask us to set up an action, and we're going to set up a new outbound message here. So we go to new outbound message. We give it a name like OBM Cloud Contact Process. And then the endpoint URL, I'm actually going to go back to my Informatica Cloud here, go back to my Design Home tab. You can see here's my Cloud Contact process showing published. I want to go ahead and grab the URL that is provided, and then I'll come back to Salesforce, drop it in here. Now, as I said, we want to make sure that we're going to send this as actually the API user, so you can just select and drop down here, API user. We want to send the session ID because that's actually how we're going to authenticate. We're able to use the Salesforce authentication mechanism behind the scenes to authenticate this call. And then the only field that we need to send is the ID. As you saw when we designed the process, we were able to reach back into Salesforce and grab any field on that object or related objects. So no need to create complex SQL queries or create formula fields to cram all the information that you need onto one object just in order to make an outbound message call like this. So that's what we have here. We're going to go ahead and save it. All right, and we'll hit done here. So here's our rule. The criteria is that the validation status is not equal to valid, and the last modified by not equal to API user. Let's go ahead and do this thing. Now, important key step, you want to make sure to activate your rule so that you, when you actually run the process, it will do the thing. You can deactivate the rule at any time as well, but that has to be clicked so we can make sure that the process executes. So now that we've got all that in place, we can go over here
to our accounts, and we're going to go into an account, and we're going to pretend now that we are an end user, and we're going to come in here doing what we're supposed to do. Scroll on down to the contact section. We're going to go ahead and hit new contact, and we're going to enter some information here. So our contact information for this person under Core Care Technologies is going to be Mr. Casey Clayton. We'll make sure he gets a first name and a last name. He is the weatherman here at Core Care Technologies, and he's got phone number information here. I'm going to put in my email. Now, actually, what I'm going to do when I'm, this is all about kind of that validation step, right? So I'm going to go ahead and fat finger this, and accidentally hit a couple extra A's in there. Now, by regular inspection, it's got an @ it's got a dot, it could be an email address, but this isn't actually a valid domain. So the ability to verify that, be the reason that actually we're calling this web service here today. There's a lot of use cases around validation and enrichment that can be handled in real time. Let's go ahead and hit save here. Now, behind the scenes, this should have triggered the workflow rule, which called the outbound message, which ran the process, and we can actually verify that that happened within Informatica Cloud and the process console or the service and process monitor. So you come in here to Informatica Cloud, you go to service and process console. It will give you the ability to see all the various processes that are executing on your environment. And if you have the tracing turned on, as we do, we'll actually be able to dig into the individual execution. There's our cloud contact process. It's executed, it is completed. We can kind of come in here and take a look a little bit closer to see what has occurred. So you can see we started. We ran that validate email. The email to verify C. Clayton came back false. So you can see we have the data decision. Oh, and then we took this lower road. We created that data validation task for the user. So this process says it's done what it's supposed to do. Let's go back to Salesforce and verify that that has occurred. I'm going to refresh this. Remember, it's not validated when it first started, but behind the scenes, this process is executed. Yeah, and so now the validation status is invalid. Validation messages here are email validation failed. There's the email address provided. You come down here, and we can actually find this activity that was created for me, the contact owner, as we had anticipated. So, okay, yeah, I know what I need to do as a user. I need to come in and fix this. This failed. I can see that this is incorrect. So I'm going to come in here and fix it. Hit save. And so this, once again, meeting our criteria, the fact that it was not valid and the fact that I'm not the API user, we should see another execution in our process console here. So if I refresh, see cloud contact process again. Yep, there it is, same version, but just a different execution. You can see here, all right, we validated the email. Oh, great, that came back true. Okay, we've created the feed item and we've updated the validation status. So if we come back to our contact, let's refresh the page. We're valid. We've got that cleaned up, and let's see if I show feed here. Oh, that's right. We put it on the account. So let's go up to the account and take a look. There it is. Contact updated and validated. Casey. All right. In conclusion, we've just demonstrated how you can use Informatica Cloud and Salesforce workflow rules and outbound messages to create a totally code-free interaction between Salesforce and an API to do validation. Now, outbound messages can do more than just a single API call that we've shown here. We're going to get into other chapters, where we're going to talk about different use cases and actions. We thank you for your time and for joining us on the DIY API, and we look forward to seeing you on the next edition.